34 minutes after the hour on the Michael Medved Show, and as promised, one of the nice things about working with Senator Rand Paul is when he promises to come on and connect with us, he's there. And he is right there on a very, very busy day with lots going on in Washington, D.C. Senator Paul, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be with you, Michael.
Now, I, of course, want to talk a little bit about the National Security Agency and your position on everything that's been revealed. But I want to speak first about a speech you delivered earlier today, which is already wildly controversial. And I thought it was a terrific speech, actually. You are talking about immigration reform, and you have some points in common with the current bill that's making its way through the Senate, and some points where you differ very strongly. The one point I wanted to focus on, I was actually surprised to see it, is I had thought and understood that there was a very, very strong consensus in the Senate of the United States and really in the country that we need more workplace enforcement to make sure that employers and businesses don't hire people who are here in this country illegally. You oppose, however, E-Verify, and you don't. You say in the speech that you don't want to see our businesses used to enforce immigration laws. Why not?
Mainly because I don't want, I've been an individual business owner. I don't want to be the policeman. And I see some downside to it because, for example, let's say I run a lawn company and you tell me that if they catch me hiring somebody who's not on E-Verify, it will be a $100,000 fine. And so I get 10 people with brown skin that apply and 10 people with white skin who apply. And I say to myself, well, one of these guys with brown skin could be lying to me and have false documents, and what if the E-Verify doesn't spit it out and we make a mistake, or somehow he uses a real name and we don't catch him, but then we get fined $100,000? My incentive is really, why should I hire people with brown skin? So I think it builds in some endemic racism into hiring and firing. I'm concerned about that. That being said, I know there's got to be some kind of way that you have to police this. One way that's been suggested to me by Stephen King, and I actually kind of like this idea, is to make it part of the tax structure instead of big, huge penalties. Just say that if you get challenged for your workers for deducting their wages as expenses, that you would have to show proof that you have used some sort of voluntary E-Verify, but you would only have to show it if you're audited, which would make it a little less cumbersome.
You're not saying, Senator, that you want to rely on the IRS to enforce immigration.
Sounds a bit ironic, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does, because I don't think anybody here has been more critical of the IRS than Rand Paul.
I'm trying to look for a way that doesn't cause businesses to have, a large fines and intrusive behavior from the government on immigration and not build in sort of some endemic presupposition or predisposition not to want to hire Hispanic people. So I'm worried about it, I guess is the best way to put it. Is that a deal killer for me? Maybe, maybe not. The thing that's a deal killer for me is if we don't actually strengthen the border before we do the process of immigration reform. So like my amendment says that we will document the workers who want to stay and work, but it is dependent upon border security and dependent upon Congress voting that the border is increasingly secure. I will have a vote on that amendment. If I can win it, I'm a possibility as a vote for this bill. So far, it doesn't look like they're too interested in allowing me to pass any of my amendments, though.
Your amendment has the amendment on border security seems to be similar to an amendment which Senator Cornyn has put forward. Are you going to be supporting Senator Cornyn's amendments?
I'm sure I'll support his amendment. They do have similarities. We think ours goes a step farther in that it requires Congress to vote each year for 5 years, saying that the border is becoming secure, and the documentation of workers ends or stops if the border is found not to be secure. The main complaint from 86, from conservatives who actually supported the bill in 86, was they told us border security would come, and it never came.
Oh, they also said that workplace enforcement would come. That
also
basically
said
they would bust employers who knowingly hired illegals.
Absolutely. They also said that there would be a work visa program that works. My biggest complaint is if you do not have a functioning work visa program where people can come in legitimately to pick crops and things like that, If you limit the amount of workers, then you're still going to have illegal immigration.
Well, that's
exactly
right. We will be right back with Senator Rand Paul talking about the National Security Agency and much more with a senator from Kentucky coming up. 44 minutes after the hour on the Michael Medved Show, on with Senator Rand Paul, and I have the great privilege of seeing Senator Paul for lunch tomorrow, because that's going to be the kickoff for the Road to Majority Conference from 2013 from the Faith and Freedom Coalition. The opening speakers, listen to this. The number one opening speaker, Senator Rand Paul, followed by Senator Mike Lee of Utah, followed by the great Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, and Senator Marco Rubio. A pretty good lineup, and Marco Rubio is going to be joining us on the show tomorrow. Senator Paul, pretty good lineup, I think.
Yeah, I know all those guys. Those are some of the best guys in the Senate.
Absolutely right, and you included among them, sir. And I'm speaking on Friday, actually, before the show. We'll be broadcasting live from Washington, D.C., and my wife is going to be speaking, Dr. Diane Medved, during the show on a panel about marriage and family issues. Senator Paul, speaking of issues that are obsessing the public right now, you've been extraordinarily outspoken about the National Security Agency, not quite as outspoken as your father, but outspoken. And what I would ask you, and I know you will have an answer to this because you do, what should change? What should actually happen to fix a situation that you decry?
You know, I'm a big believer in the original intent of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So the Fourth Amendment says you can't have a search without a warrant, and it has to be specific to a person and a place and a thing. So what I object to in this is that they're looking at and storing a billion phone calls a day, and that would be what I would call a general warrant. It's not a specific warrant to a person. They're actually collecting records of everyone, basically every cell phone call. So I would say that is generalized and not specific, and therefore I'd say it's unconstitutional.
You omitted one crucial word when you were summarizing the Fourth Amendment, which is unreasonable search and seizures. And is it unreasonable, given the fact that these phone records that we're talking about all exist? We know they exist. We've known for a long time, and Verizon is going to have them, and CenturyLink is going to have them, and the different phone companies, AT&T is going to have them. Do you think it's inappropriate for the government to sift through that material looking for potential terrorist connections?
I guess what I'm concerned about is, I'm not real trusting of the government right now, particularly this administration. And so after an IRS scandal where they target their political opponents, my concern would be that data from cell phones, metadata, can actually track your movements. So basically your cell phone is a GPS unit that tracks your whereabouts throughout the day, and I've jokingly said that I'm going to leave my phone at home so the president doesn't know when I'm at different Republican meetings where we all are gathered. But I'm half serious about that because the data they've collected can track movements. Now, they say they're not doing it currently, but they say they can do it from tracking your cell phone. Last year there was a case in the Supreme Court, the Jones case, and it said that the police cannot willy-nilly put a GPS tracking device on your car unless there are probable cause that you committed a crime. So I think we get lost in too much data, and I think we get so lost that we don't do some of the things we should do. Like the Boston bomber that went back to Chechnya, somehow we didn't look and notice that he flew back to Chechnya. That means we're distracted and we're looking at an enormous haystack of data and information and not doing good police work. Same way with the underwear bomber. The underwear bomber came from Nigeria and his dad informed upon him, but we didn't put the dots together and link things together through good police work. Now they're saying that there is one guy, this subway bomber, they may have caught through metadata through these phone calls. However, 3 months before he was caught, they had another guy named Abdid Nasir who was making phone calls to him, so I suspect they actually had a link through the normal process. I'm all for getting terrorists, but I say go to a judge, get a warrant. If you find phone calls that potential terrorist is making, get another warrant, and you chase down the trail to find people, but I don't think we have to give up the privacy of all of our records to do that.
I know there are two Democrats who are working on legislation to try to codify and to restrict these governmental programs. Ron Wyden of Oregon, Dick Durbin of Illinois. Are you working with them on some actual legislation fixes, as you see it, to the National Security Agency programs?
Not yet, but we in all likelihood will. I work together with Ron Wyden on a lot of civil liberties issues. My complaint has really been above and beyond this, that for about 40 years or more, the courts have been ruling that when you give your records voluntarily to a bank or to a phone company or to a computer company, that you give up your right to privacy. And I argue the opposite. When I give my consent to Google or Yahoo to do a search, I sign a privacy agreement or to have my email, and the privacy agreement actually says that they're not going to give up my stuff to the government unless I'm accused of a crime and they have probable cause. But then through these programs, they actually are doing it because they give immunity to the telephone company. You're actually not allowed to sue the telephone company. So all of these lawsuits against the telephone company will be immediately thrown out because the law says you can't sue the telephone company. They gave them immunity. But I object to that. I really think that your third-party records, you do deserve some privacy. If you see my Visa bill, you can see where I shop, whether I gamble, whether I smoke, whether I drink, whether I read conservative free market magazines, which I do, whether I see a psychiatrist, which I don't yet. But you can tell all of that information about me by looking at my Visa bill. I would think I do deserve privacy and not having anybody look at my Visa bill.
Yeah, but Visa looks at your Visa bill, and apparently it is a fairly common thing now, particularly if you ever pay the bill by Internet, and I bet you do, that they go ahead and take a look at patterns in your billing, and they target you with advertisements for products they think you're going to like. Do you have a problem with that?
If I've agreed to that, it's okay. If I haven't agreed to it, I have a problem. Most of the time, though, when you share it with a private company, they don't reveal your name, and you also have agreed to it voluntarily. My objection with the government is that it may be that they want to target conservatives for audits, and so I don't want them knowing that I read Human Events or Reason magazine, because then I might be on a target list.
Well,
that's why these are all tied together.
I think you're on every target list anyway, Rand Paul. He is the junior senator from Kentucky, and at the very thick of controversies regarding immigration, the National Security Agency, and much more. Right back with Senator Rand Paul.
What a guy! There is a
55 minutes after the hour on the Michael Medved Show, Senator Rand Paul had to go vote, which is what he's paid to do. They are voting on amendments right now, a whole series, long series of amendments, no climactic vote on the Senate version of the immigration reform bill. It does appear to be very likely that the bill will pass in some form in the U.S. Senate. What happens in the House is unclear. But some form of immigration reform will probably pass in the House, and then they go to conference, and we'll see. But Rand Paul, I do want to say this about Senator Paul. You know, because if you've been listening to me the last couple of days, I am not as concerned by any means as Senator Paul is about the National Security Agency programs to try to keep us safer from terrorist assault. But it's a pleasure to talk to him about it, and I'll tell you why. And I told him this off the air. The thing that is so refreshing about Rand Paul is he actually kind of answers questions, which not all politicians do. And he's smart. And being smart doesn't go all the way, but you can have a normal conversation with him. And both off the air and on the air. And he's interested in things. And he's learning all the time. I don't believe that's true of the President of the United States. Not that he's not smart, but that he actually listens and considers questions and thinks about them. As a candidate, and it's very striking, he's robotic. You saw what happened the other day when he didn't have his prepared remarks in front of him. That would never happen to Rand Paul. Let's go to Terry in San Bernardino, California. Terry, you're on the med.